Welcome back to Rarely Typical, a podcast where I am talking about living with chronic illness, finding hope, and living a life that is rarely typical. I'm super excited about today's guest. This is my friend Sarah. And Sarah and I have been friends, I guess, for about 4 years now. And we met on Facebook. And we have been able to connect on ways that my able bodied friends are not able to connect with only because Sarah has a visible illness and at one point fought cancer. She is in remission and is no longer fighting cancer, but the nuances of having to live with her amputation. Today, we're going to talk about invisible versus visible illnesses.
Hi, guys. I'm Sarah. I'm so excited to be here. Really honored to be able to jump into this podcast, especially in its early episodes. Thanks, Gerry, for having me.
And if you're new here, my name is Gerry Langan, and I was diagnosed with a rare disease called pulmonary arterial hypertension and secondary disease congestive heart failure, both of which are technically invisible illnesses. I do wear a pump, and my sites or my ports are visible when they're on my arms. Right now they are, but if you're watching this on YouTube, they're underneath my jacket. But normally, when I am wearing a short sleeve shirt or I'm wearing a tank top, you can see the sites that are on my arm, and then you see tubing that runs from my arm to my pump that I wear underneath my shirt. But otherwise, PAH and congestive heart failure are considered invisible illnesses because when you look at me, especially if you don't see my pump or you don't see my site and it's covered up, then you do not know that I'm fighting an invisible illness. And today, Sarah and I will be chatting about the differences of having a visible versus an invisible illness and what that looks like in daily life.
Yeah. So, over the years of friendship with Gerry, we've definitely bonded and laughed over coffee when comparing our interactions just with the general public. Then also seeing it firsthand when we're out together and comparing notes on how they treat me and how they treat her as we just try to navigate life. So, in 2012, I was diagnosed with stage 3 osteosarcoma, which is a very aggressive form of bone cancer. The tumor was located in the left side of my pelvis. And so treatment for that was the chemotherapy and the radiation. But in the end, the only way to give me any chance of surviving the cancer was to remove the tumor. And because of its location and its size, the only way to do that effectively was to amputate my left leg. And so I'm missing my left leg in its entirety. So not just my ankle and knee, but also my hip and half of my pelvis internally. Because of that, I do have a prosthetic. It is heavy and cumbersome and has to replace all three joints mechanically. And so it's pretty difficult to ambulate with and hold me back. Because of all that, I choose to ambulate using forearm crutches. And so my disability is very obvious. I can't hide behind a prosthetic and pants because I'm using these crutches and missing a very large portion of my physical body. So yeah, I stand out in a crowd. It's not something that I can ever hide, and it's something that I've gotten used to over the years. And honestly, I've gotten to a point now because it's been 12, 13 years where I'm comfortable enough in it that sometimes I even forget that I look just so different from everybody else that it surprises me when people see it, remind me that, yeah, no, I'm very different.
So, very funny story. The first time Sarah and I met, we were at a playground and we were supposed to meet up. And I got there first and I was sitting there and I was waiting. And she pulled up. And at the time, she had a Tesla Model X and the doors opened up like butterfly doors. And I remember sitting there and thinking, whoa, that car is really cool. And she got out and she was coming over to where I was and I like waved at her. And I was still thinking about how cool the car was. And I realized like 20 minutes later that she only had one leg. And it's funny because I do feel like I notice when people double take when Sarah is walking and they notice that she only has one leg and it's like a double take and they're like, "Oh my god." But I think me and the kids have been around Sarah so much that like I don't ever notice it anymore. And oftentimes Sarah is moving faster than I am. So most of the time I'm the one that's slowing us down even though I have both of my legs. And so when we're going places, I notice when people are looking at us, but Sarah literally never notices. And I just think it's so funny because you can tell sometimes that people want to help Sarah, but she ignores them and has no idea. And when you're with her, you naturally want to help her, but I think because I've been around her so much, like, most of the time I don't even try.
Yeah, so honestly, that's the biggest compliment my friends can pay me is by just forgetting that I'm disabled and just letting me go about life without overcompensating for my disability and trying to help me at every single turn. And I don't speak for everybody with a physical disability. I am speaking on my personal preferences because I am very type A personality. I'm very stubborn, overly so. And I take a lot of pride in my independence and how hard I've worked over the years to gain independence and to be able to live my life on my own terms. But those preferences are only things that you would know about me if you knew me on a personal level, and the general public doesn't know me like that. They see me, and a lot of times people will just jump to conclusions about my abilities and will try to help in situations where I don't need the help or want the help. And early on, when I first lost my leg, I didn't meet that back with the same kindness that people were extending towards me. I was probably in a way still mourning and coming to terms with losing my leg and desperately wanting to be independent. And so when people would try to swoop in and save me and help me, I would get really frustrated with them because it felt like they were trying to steal away that independence and looking down on me. And over the years, I've gotten a lot better about that. I've come to realize that it's just kindness and humanity, which is an amazing and beautiful thing. And I try to meet it back with gratefulness, even when it's not something I would personally prefer. But honestly, if it were the other way around, if people were just jerks and treated me differently and were not kind and not willing to help, no, I definitely prefer it more when people overstep and try to help me out, but it is just really irritating when I'm just trying to go through a door, and I go through doors every day. I know how to get through a door just fine, but sometimes I'll go to push on a door and I have my hands braced on the door to get through it, and somebody will see me and try to rush over really fast and open the door for me, and they'll snatch that door out from my hand, and I have one leg, and I'm now weight bearing on my hand on that door, and so essentially, it's like you've just kicked out one of my feet from underneath me, and no one realizes that, because why would you think that when you're just responding to something that you see and you wanna assist somebody? And then all of a sudden, they're standing in the doorway, and they're in my way, and now it's awkward because I have to navigate with the crutches around them, and it's just frustrating because 'cause I'm just minding my own business trying to get through the door, and all of a sudden this person has rushed up on me. Maybe I didn't see them coming. It's a stranger. Like, what are their intentions? But again, like, I try to be grateful for it because what if I was struggling? They don't know me. And what if I didn't want to ask for help, but really desperately needed the help to get through the store? But again, that's a personal preference, and you wouldn't know that about me unless you spend time with me. So I try to remember that.
Yeah, so it's super funny, like, being friends with Sarah because, like, we both are dealing with different things, but most of the time when people look at me, they, like, do not assume that I need any help in any capacity, and Sarah has hiked Kilimanjaro. This past summer, she hiked the Grand Canyon from rim to rim. So Sarah is more than able-bodied, even though she's missing one of her legs. She's definitely more able-bodied than most able-bodied people, I think. And so I am just used to that, and I often don't help Sarah because I also know that Sarah's more than capable of doing things. It's really funny when we go places because I 99% of the time do not hold a door for Sarah because there have been many instances where I have tried and we have gotten in each other's way. So most of the time I will push the door open and then I will just keep going, but I will push the door hard enough so that she can catch it with her crutch and then walk through it. But I have seen people watch me do this, and you can tell that they think I'm like the world's biggest asshole because I did not hold the door open for her. But she does not need me to hold the door for her because most of the time she holds the door for me with her crutch because it's just easier that way. I think it's even funnier because when we go places and we park in handicap, it's not that Sarah can't get through a parking lot on her own. I am usually the one that is out of breath and needs a second, and Sarah is always the one stopping for me, but you can tell that people think that we're parking in the handicap most of the time because Sarah needs the help, and it's very often that is backwards, and it's me that we're parking in handicap for, and nobody would ever think that. People will probably look at me and Sarah and think that I'm Sarah's caregiver, which is hilarious because it's just not true. And there have been so many instances in our friendships where things like that have happened. I always think of this one time we were at Disney and we were leaving this ride and we were going up the stairs. We had the option to go up the stairs or wait for the elevator. And we were with our husbands and Joe, Sarah's husband, was actually saying that he was exhausted and wanted to ride the elevator, and I was like, "No, we should just take the stairs because it was gonna take forever to wait on the elevator." And you could tell that the 15 people around us were like, "What the heck did this girl just say that this girl with one leg needs to take the stairs?" Listen, y'all, Sarah can go up the stairs a lot faster than me, and she goes up them like 3 at a time. I have to stop and take a breath by the time I get to the top, and I'm usually huffing and puffing, and you could tell that all these people were like, "This girl just made this girl with one leg go up the freaking stairs," and it had nothing to do with Sarah. Honestly, it was me and Joe that were weighing everybody down. So it's just funny because visible versus invisible illnesses, you genuinely never know what somebody is going through, and for me and Sarah, unless I have my sight out, you really don't know that I'm the one that's sick, and Sarah's actually the one that is not sick, right? She isn't dealing with an active chronic illness. I'm the one dealing with an active chronic illness. She might be missing a leg, but for the most part, Sarah's pretty healthy.
The amount of times people have chased me down when I'm literally halfway up or down the stairs to tell me that there's an elevator or a ramp nearby is really funny because, like, I'm already halfway up the stairs. But also, I know about the elevator and I'm too lazy to either wait for it or walk the extra 100 feet to it. And I know that makes absolutely no sense, but it's just the way I am. But it's also interesting because a lot of times, especially before Jerry's clinical trial, it's been convenient being together because people automatically make accommodations for me without thinking about it or being asked to because they just see me and assume. And then it's nice because those accommodations just extend to Jerry without her having to ask for it or look for them. It just is automatically given to us. So it's kind of an advantage of being my friend. But it's come into play a few times, but I distinctly remember we went to a trip in New York City. She came with me for an event I was speaking at, and we were doing some sightseeing, and we went up to the Rockefeller Tower, which I don't even remember how many stories high it is, but it's, like, above the clouds. It's way up there. And again, this is before her trial, and so we got all the way up there, and the air's thin, and I'm doing fine. I'm looking and taking the sights and taking pictures, and I look over, and Jerry's out of breath and dizzy, and there's not a lot of seats up there, and she's like, "I don't feel well." And I just started to panic because I was like, "I don't know what's happening. I don't know if she's gonna pass out." And I knew that we needed to get downstairs quick. I mean, she specifically said to me, "We need to leave. I need to get downstairs. I need to get back to the ground level." And I don't normally push my way through or cut the line because whatever, but I just barreled through. I was like, "Hey, we gotta cut the line. We need to get on this elevator. I need to get on this elevator now." And no one questioned us. They just saw me coming and said, "Okay, yeah, let's go." And so we got on the elevator and we went downstairs. And so fully took advantage. But yeah, it's just interesting to see that and be out. But Jerry brought up another really good point and something that we talk about a lot about, our situations and how we're both dealing with different things, but how we would never really I would never trade places with her. I mean, I'm just being honest. Like my life isn't all sunshine and rainbows, but I'm stable. Like my cancer doctors, my oncologist is you're in remission, there's no evidence of disease, you're 13, 14 years out, the chances of recurrence are really low. They're still willing to see me, but they don't want to see me. I check in once a year and I don't even have to do that if I don't want to. And that's a really good place to be. And so, yeah, I'm living with this pretty devastating physical disability that I'll live with for the rest of my life and will always affect me. But I don't have any big worries about my health going forward. There's some concerns with some of the side effects from the drugs I was on to survive and beat cancer. And those are things that I am aware of and might play a role later, but I'm just coasting now. It's just different.
I mean, Sarah and I definitely talk about that whether or not we would ever trade places, and I don't know if I would ever trade places with Sarah either. I know that I'm dealing with an active illness, but in the flip side, I can definitely blend in and you would never know that I was sick, right? And so there's good and bad of that. There's great parts where people are not always trying to help me or people are not always feeling bad for me when like I feel like crap. Like today, I'm in the middle of Hell Week and I feel like crap right now. But you would never know that. And so it's nice sometimes to be able to blend in, but it also sucks when you do need help and when your disease is active and you are dealing with side effects. And I spend a lot of time in the bathroom and I often need to catch a breath, or sometimes I need Sarah to slow down. Sarah walks very fast with crutches. Her swing is a lot longer, her stride. And so she walks at the pace of Jason, who is 6'2", and those strides mean that I have to walk a lot faster, and so I have to tell Sarah to slow down so often. But you would never know that I was struggling unless I said that, and people don't adjust often because they don't think about it because I don't look sick. So, there's like nuances to either side of the story, especially when you're dealing with an invisible illness and you go into a doctor's office. Very often, Sarah has come with me to the doctor, and most of the time, people think that we're probably there for Sarah, but really we're there for me. I'm always the youngest patient in the room. People are always looking at me like, who did she come with? Why is she here? You know what I mean? And it's just funny because it's an invisible illness when I look healthy versus somebody who's in the waiting room, who's older with a walker or oxygen, and you think they must be sicker than she is. But sometimes that's not actually the case. Sometimes people are on oxygen and they're doing a lot better than I am, and my heart is in failure. So it's just very different. But I don't know if I would trade places. I really don't.
Yeah, I think your ability to blend in is probably the only thing I'm super jealous of, but also if I sit in that and think about it and see what you go through, I would probably get really frustrated and irritated with having to constantly explain myself to people, so I'm gonna stop being jealous about that. Except for when people approach me and are intrusive and feel, like, entitled to asking me very personal questions, because my disability is a very personal thing, and a lot of times people will rush up and it's the very first thing they ask me is, "How'd you lose your leg?" And a lot of times I wanna respond with, "Hi, how are you? Hello, my name's Sarah." You don't even know my name, and you feel like you can go ahead and start asking me. And I am actually really open and comfortable talking about it because, it's not my entire identity, but it does make up a huge part of who I am. And it's not something I'm ashamed of. And I do enjoy sharing my story with others. I openly do that. Just read the room, time and place when people think that they can just ask that. The other day, I was getting in my car and an older gentleman, super sweet man, saw that I had a veteran plate on my car. He thought, "Oh, are you a veteran?" And I am. And immediately I was like, "What happened? Did you step on a landmine?" I was like, "Oh, man." Super insensitive. And so I have a lot of friends in the disabled veteran community who went through something traumatizing, and don't ever assume that you can ask that, like, you don't know the person. And I wanted to end my part on this podcast with just giving maybe a little bit of advice or just my own perspective on that is just get to know someone first, right? And that's just in life. That disability, illness aside, you should get to know someone first before you get intrusive. Most of the time, these conversations come up naturally, and that's how it should be. Let a person share with you if they're comfortable sharing with you. And that can be hard. Like, I know I see somebody with a physical disability and I'm intrinsically curious. Like, I want to know their story, but I'm not entitled to it. We're just all humans, and you should treat the person with kindness and understanding first and foremost, and just get to know them, whether that's a visible illness or injury or disability or one that you find out because it's invisible and you start to learn more about that person and there's a story there. Just be authentic with that person. Get to know them first. It's a friendship and you want to build trust there. It'll come.
It's funny Sarah says that because I remember when I asked her about how she lost her leg, it took a very long time. And I honestly was like, I wonder how long I can go before I ask her. And we were sitting on a golf cart and we were watching the kids play on the playground and I said, "Do you just want to swap war stories or what?" And we did. And she told me about how she lost her leg and I told her about my condition. And I do think that we have a very different friendship than I think all of my other friendships because we are connected on a level that supersedes those other relationships because of our ability to relate with each other in ways that somebody else could not relate. And no shade to any of my other friends. I love all of my friends in different capacities. But I think the hole that Sarah fills was one I didn't realize that I needed was that somebody could just understand me and also we could live side by side with both of our conditions and it would just be normal. It just would be. And I think there's a lot of beauty in that, a lot of beauty in being around somebody who maybe can't relate like all the way, right? Because Sarah doesn't deal with an invisible illness, but being able to relate to somebody who lives with a chronic illness and she had a very scary diagnosis. We talk about our wills and what happens if something bad happens. She's my kid's emergency contact. There's a lot of nuances, I think, to our relationship that is different than my other friendships because we have had to think about things that other people don't normally think about. We've had to deal with things like in our marriages, with our kids, parenting, that I feel like people who have never dealt with illness in any way could not possibly understand.
Yeah, my husband is constantly telling me to remind Jerry that she is not my primary spouse, that he is my primary spouse, and she's just the backup. No, but in all seriousness, she's my ride or die. She's my plus one when my normal plus one isn't available, which is a lot because we're just busy. But it's nice because I mean, my husband was my caregiver and we have a really good relationship. And he can see how important this friendship is for all those reasons, right? That we just talked about and how fulfilling it is for me and how much I need it and just community. And I'm sure Jerry talks about that a lot in all of our episodes. It's just finding community and people that have your back. So I take advantage of it because he is always very supportive of when I'm like, hey, I want to go do this with Jerry or spend this time with her or get into this hobby or whatever. He's supportive because he knows her very well now and knows how important she is to me and how important this connection and having someone that can relate to me and the things that I've been through and just the path that life has taken me on that is not what I ever expected or had planned for in young adulthood and now into having children and just having a different perspective on life in general. This friendship is very important to me and being able to talk about these things. So really appreciate you having me on this podcast. It's always nice to sit and reflect because we're busy and we just go about mom life and can get complacent sometimes. And I think it's really important to step back sometimes and reflect on the journey and see what we've been through.
So, thank you guys for joining us today. We love being able to chat with you. I love that you guys get to see me and Sarah on the same screen. Normally, when one of us is speaking, the other one is in the audience. So, it's really cool to be able to do something together for once. I am thankful that you guys tune in every week. I'm thankful that you're listening to this. If you love this, if you related to it at all, please subscribe and comment. And till next week.